with. Good afternoon.
Well, good afternoon, Ian, and listeners. First of all, let me start by saying that biological sex is real, and so is gender identity. They're two different things. They're not the same, but they're both equally valid. And in a democratic liberal society, we have to try and find a way of reconciling them to avoid some of the instances that Bev has spoken about. As far as I'm aware, there's never been any court judgment in this country to compel a lesbian to have sex with a trans woman or to date a trans woman. That is, and I'm sure there have been a few examples where a trans woman has tried to date a lesbian, but of course, a lesbian is perfectly within her rights to refuse to date a
But it
trans
doesn't
woman.
make you, I think the point there with Bev was that it doesn't make you a wicked transphobe if you say, well, I'm never ever going to, like, I'm never going to date a trans woman. That's not going to happen. And I can say that, I can say that without being a transphobic son of a gun, can't I?
Absolutely. I have never supported those who say that lesbians must date trans women. That is completely wrong.
Okay.
Lesbians have every right to refuse to date a person of any kind. No one should be forced to date anyone.
True.
And I think this is a bit of a mountain out of a molehill because, as I say, the courts have never ruled that lesbians must date trans women. And all the lesbians I know, when they've been approached by trans women, they've politely said no, thank you. And the trans woman has accepted that and said okay. So it's a bit of a mountain out of a molehill. But on the wider issue, this judgment, my understanding is that it will not prevent organizations from choosing to accept trans women if they wish to. So, for example, I have a friend who works for a women's centre in the north of England. For the last, I think, 7 years now, by the agreement of the staff and the users, they have accepted trans women and they've never had a problem. It's a happy centre where everybody is welcome and it's trans inclusive. The law won't force them to deny trans women, providing no one objects. But of course, if someone does object, then the centre told me they would have to change their policy.
And there's clearly always going to be people with different views. You know, we're a healthy democracy, Peter, and you know, not everybody is always on the same page with every sinew of a judgment. But broadly speaking, something like a woman's refuse, there would be, you might imagine. You know, a lot of people would say, hang on, this is for women, not for blokes. And of course, this judgment does very much say that a trans woman is not a woman.
But
Therefore, a bloke.
It also says now that trans men must use women's toilets. And that's going to cause incredible distress to women when they go to a toilet thinking it's for them and suddenly a trans man walks in. Imagine the shock, discomfort and fear that some of those women might feel.
Yeah, I genuinely asked that. Yeah, I genuinely asked that question because I was never, you know, I've never been able to work that out. And just to go over what I said a little earlier, Peter, you know, I've done this job for a long time, as you know, and this was never ever a debate. It was never a discussion. It wasn't on the agenda. It suddenly appeared out of nowhere, it seems. And I've often wondered where or how it came around. And it seems to me that, yes, of course, there are trans people who will have felt discriminated against over the years, but this has been a political thing, hasn't it? This hasn't really come from people who genuinely feel I'm in the wrong body, I need to live my life differently. This has come from, you know, the identitarian Marxist left, if you like, who've gone in hard on this. You can be whoever you want to be. You want to call yourself, if you've got a penis and a beard and you want to call yourself a woman, you've got every right to do that, and the rest of the world should bend over backwards to accommodate it.
No, that's not true or fair, Ian. The call for trans inclusion has come from trans people themselves who've been marginalised and discriminated against, and that is wrong. This judgment, of course, also says that trans people will continue to be protected under the Equality Act against discrimination, but it will allow, in certain circumstances, same-sex women-only spaces to be preserved. Now that's it's a difficult issue. The other issue, of course, is when it comes to biology, biology isn't simple. A trans woman who undertakes hormone treatment and gender reassignment will have many of the attributes of a biological woman. The hormone treatment will actually change their physiology.
But she'll never be a biological woman, though, will she?
It will change their, reduce their muscle mass, reduce their strength.
Would it change their chromosomes, Peter?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. It won't change their chromosomes.
So they remain a man.
Biology is not a simply, black and white, cut and dried issue. It is complex. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where this judgment has ruled in one direction, and that will mean for many trans people a great deal of anxiety. I think and hope that most organizations will respond in a measured way, and will, perhaps we can find new solutions. Now, for example, on the issue of toilets, if we have more gender neutral toilets, like you have at a pop concert or a festival, the toilets there, they're not male and female, they're gender neutral. Well, more institutions could have gender neutral toilets, and that might solve that problem. And then in terms of trans participation or involvement or attendance or ability to access women-only spaces, perhaps some organizations might now make new trans inclusive spaces available for trans people.
And that would be
separate is not equal, separate is not desirable, but that may be a solution.
Okay, well, people will have their own views on where you draw a line, as in things like participating in sport, etc. But that maybe is an argument for another day. Meantime, Peter, thank you, Peter Tatchell. He is, of course, human